So we be looking at some stuff on apps. So all right. So okay. So one thing I want to look at is this paper right here. This is in the Christopher Columbus papers, or his journal, right? So basically, they describing the Indians right here, and it says their hair was coarse, almost like the tail of a horse, and short. See, coarse and short. Says they wear their hair down over their eyebrows, except for a little in the back, which they wear long and never cut. So they had like a tail or something, long hair in the back, right? Short. Their hair is coarse and short, right? That's down in the islands. So there, right? That was Christopher Columbus journal. You look right here, these are some Louisiana Indians. They have short with the tail. See the tail? See the tail? See right there. Now this, they're actually darker. This right light online in front is the real copy is way darker tone people. So, but I just wanted to show you the tail. See, Louisiana. They was either Natchez or Choctaw Indians. But anyway, so let's get back over here. All right, so one other thing I wanted to show you. So this is mapping the Tuscarora War, a brief catalog of maps collected and exhibited at Joyner Library, East Carolina University. Okay, so let's go down here. I'll read a little bit of this. That's how it looked. That's okay, anyway. It says the English arrived on the coast of Virginia, 1590, when Sir Walter Raleigh sent his first explorers, Amadas and Barlow, to Roanoke Island in 1584. Native Indians already had a half century of experience with European adventurers. The Spanish had come and gone already. The English knew as well that they would encounter Indians. In this early depiction of the arrival of Englishmen on the coast of Carolina, the English explorers have penetrated the outer banks and are sailing across Roanoke Sound in the out a cross bringing Christianity and peace to Indians standing on Roanoke Island. There are villages denoted by circular palisades, it says. Okay, this is what I was getting at. See, this is giving you maps. This is from the university. and it's talking about the villages denoted by circular palisades. Okay, remember them? Talked about the palisades and the villages being behind the palisades. Okay, there are villages denoted by circular palisades on the island and at two places on the mainland, which they say the names of it is two tribe names anyway. Each village is partly surrounded by three fields of hardy maize or corn, right? Three fields, surrounded by three fields of corn. Other Indians are busy in the waters gathering fish, the other principal source of food for coastal Indians. Two Indian lands are indicated as well, Sikotan and Pamiak. The Indians are at peace. Meanwhile, English ships are shown foundering in the treacherous shallow waters and shallows just off the banks. Okay, see, that's it right there. Virginia, see, says a few tribe names, see, Cotan, Chawa, the Chawa, Amak, Ima, Miak, in 1590, based on a manuscript drawn by artist John White, accompanied English maps, which attempted to specify which lands belonged to which Indians. At this stage of English-Indian contact, the map was designed to demonstrate the location of Indian villages and habitations, both as an illustration of known Indian clusters and as a guide for future English ventures. While the Indian nation later identified as Tuscarora does not appear on the map on this map, the Indians identified as Mongoloak, located in the upper left of this map, are probably the Tuscarora, as they are located approximately where Tuscarora habitations would have been both at this time and for a full millennium prior to the arrival of Europeans on the Carolina coast. So a full millennium prior to this right here, they would have been there. They said so. 1490. Okay, right. 1490. Go back up there. This is waterways. You know, they lived around those waterways. Talked about the villages being behind the Palisades. Now let's read a little more. It says the village of Sokotan. When Riley's second exploration of the Carolina coast got underway in 1585, the artist John White visited and made sketches of several Indian villages. While he did not visit Tuscarora villages away from the watery coast, Tuscarora towns would not have been much different from Sakota, an Algonquin settlement on the Pamlico Sound. Sikota was an agricultural center without a palisaded enclosure. Okay, so it said they didn't have a palisaded enclosure, right? It says Sikota was an agricultural center without a palisaded enclosure. Corn, tobacco, sunflower, and pumpkin plants are shown as abounding in the realm of the village. Okay, see, tobacco. Now, growing up, snuff, smoke, cigars, or what have you. Who else does that like that? Yeah, I never knew somebody like that in the community where so many people, uh, consume some form of tobacco or another, like our community. Moving on. Okay, it says habitations are located adjacent. to growing plots so that residents could work the fields and between agricultural operations, practice worship, and participate in festival meals. A quality of peacefulness, order, and happiness seems to be omnipresent in this scene. Later, explorers to Tuscarora settlements, such as naturalist John Lawson, found much the same pattern of existence. Now, I'm gonna stop right there. I wanted to just say that in the 1500s, this is the 1500s as well, the late 1500s, in Alabama, uh, they have Palisades towns as well. Okay, they had fortified towns and villages all over the place. But this is further proof of that. It's just what I'm point that out, and then we're gonna also point out that this is saying that they were peaceful, orderly, and happy. Okay. Now, I like to. I found this because it pertains to this Tuscarora tribe, which I tracked my people back to in the 1700s, right? So went and looked it up and look at all this. It's the same kind of stuff in Alabama, which I have people down there too, right? 1700s. Now this also tells on itself. Now let me just show you this. Out of all this, you they ain't talking about no they're not talking about no African slaves and all that. Okay, so I'm gonna read this to you. It says the ordinary posture of the Robin versus Hardaway case, though, belied its extraordinary result. The court's decision marked a watershed in the legal history of Virginian slavery. It was the first recorded holding of an Anglo American court that maternal descended from an American Indian alone established the right to freedom. This outcome was remarkable in the context of early America, where, despite present day conceptions that all slaves were Africans, Indian slavery was ubiquitous. Indian slaves could be found in all 13 mainland British colonies in 1772, as well as in the French and Spanish colonies, right? Also in the French and Spanish colonies of North America. Okay, okay. So you see, that's 1772. This right here is 1590, and they were growing. They had their own agricultural center without a palisade enclosure. Okay, so you need to we really need to focus on the villages that was behind the palisades and the ones who weren't, because that thing really matters right there, based on the context of the movements of the tribes and things of that nature. They have some that was behind the walls that were protected and that weren't going nowhere for a long time. And those who weren't, those ones who weren't, they felt, they went first basically, right? They was out in the open. Okay, they did not have a palisade enclosure. Okay, that's how we looking at this. So, okay, they talk about Tuscarora. Cause see this, yeah. Now it says the south part of Virginia, now the north part of Carolina. See, it was Virginia first. Virginia, Virginia colony or whatever like that. I got people on my documents from Virginia as well, which is hard to find. I have to actually go to that state and go up in those buildings, you see. That's a little later. It's another map. See how it's got a gang of maps? My Cumberford map of Albemarle. Okay, 1657. In the Cumberford map of 1657, the first map to show European settlements. First map to show European settlements in the Albemarle region of what would become North Carolina. Okay, so so you can just collect stuff and put a timeline together on your own. People, look, it says region of what would become North Carolina. There are also appears the first specific map reference to the Tuscarora Indians. See, the first specific map reference. So that's like a start time and stuff, well, for this map or whatnot. And you can look on it, you can see what they had and what they didn't, and what the Indians had and what they didn't or whatnot, where they was at, where they wasn't. Um, okay. Identified in two places on the map as the Tuscaroras, okay, or the Tuscaroras Indians. They are located in the same region. See how that the present day, the present day spelling, which is right above it, right there, Tuscarora Indians, right here, is spelled way different than these other two anyway. So they are located in the same region between the rivers Neuse and the Morotac or Roanoke, as those Indians identified by John White and Thomas Harry in 1585 as the Monwayak. Okay. This is where the Tuscarora would continue to live and be identified on maps until they were forcefully upended during the Tuscarora War of 1711 and 1713. Okay, so it says they were upended, right? Upended during the Tuscarora War of 1711 through 13. Okay, so let's go back and look at this. So that said 1711. So this is okay. So where the Tuscarora habitations have been for a full millennium prior to the arrival of Europeans. Okay, so first published map of Virginia appeared in 1590. Okay, yeah. So this was so the Tuscarora habitations. And let's look at this. So say 1490 to 1711. How many years is that? Over 200 and some years, right? 200 some years. So when you go down here, because these are what you call in modern times black people, right? But they have a lot of kids. They have a lot of kids, right? One person, one woman, and things would have a lot of kids. They say right here, you see, peaceful, order, and happiness. Okay, 1590, and that up there said they were there at least in 1490. You know, thriving, right? Okay. But it said they was upended in 1711. So what would all right, so I did some other reading on it, and the thing is that Tuscarora says they didn't leave quite all the way leave until into the 1800s. So when you say they were forcefully upended during the Tuscarora War of 1711 to 13, okay, so they was fighting the British for one, right? 1711 and 13, you got to think about it. It was not that many of them here, so once again, they keep talking about one tribe right here, but you had this Sikota. What was that? That other tribe there. Uh, Sikotan, the village of Sikotan, right? And them other ones. So they wasn't even by themselves right there. And they was growing food. They was peaceful and happening. So they wasn't even really warm with the uh, connecting adjacent tribes. When they say upended in 1711, you gotta think about that. Yeah, so mhm. So I said a bunch of Swiss and German Palatines. They came over here on top. It said despite the presence of Tuscarora and the other Indian settlements in the area, this dude and this other dude laid out the settlement plan shown on this map to populate the two rivers with German-speaking settlers. Now, then it says, thus displacing Tuscarora inhabitants from both their villages and from their agricultural lands, hunting grounds, and fishing waters. Okay, so only 400, right? But look, 1710. So that means they did this, and then the war kicked off in 1711, right? But it says it just you gotta understand the language here. They trying to paint a picture to you. You gotta break down every sentence if you have to. This is the picture they're trying to paint in your mind. You gotta see what the author, this other human being, what they're doing here. Okay, know what's going on. So yeah, so that kicked off the war. Okay. The town of New Bern. So now, okay, let me let me go over here and just show you something real quick. This one, because we looked at all right. So it says right here that it says most scholars of immigration believe that the influx to America was modest between 1775 and 1815. It was modest, like the influx was modest, right? It says most estimates place the influx of immigrants at an average of 5,000 per year, right? So I mean that's 40 years, 40. Every 10 you got 50. So what? 200,000 of them came in between those years. 200,000. That's not. I mean, let's see. Okay, so 200,000. They say basically right there, right? 200,000. Let's go over here to North Carolina. So it's saying right here that in 1790 there were 288,000 white people in Carolina in 1790, and then 337 in 1800. But if you go back to this, which is their book, their school book, I looked it up, found it. Okay. It says before 1820, okay, the United States did not consider the number of immigrants great enough to merit counting them. Okay, let me read that one more time. It says before 1820, the United States did not consider the number of immigrants great enough to merit counting them. 1820, right? So 30 years before that, on this document, they're saying that they counted 288,000 white people. See, this is by race. Okay? Their document they put out. And then they saying over here there was almost 5,000 free blacks and 100,000 uh, black slaves, so called, and no Indians. Look, Indians didn't come about until 1860, 1100 showed up, right? Well, not 1860, somewhere in between 1860 and 1870, right? Okay, go back over here. So Europe's surplus population. Now this is talking about this thing here. This book is talking about what made uh, Europeans leave their country, right? To cause them to come, right? So okay, so basically over here, this is an explanation. It said immigrants often followed a kind of chain in their travels. An intrepid soul, huh? An intrepid soul, usually, but not always, male, right, would leave home for the new world. Once established, the pioneer, this is what it's saying, the pioneer would write back, telling relatives and friends of what had been encountered. In many cases, the immigrant would advance passage money for others to follow. Okay, you understand this? The pioneer. That's what the the writer of this is saying about this person right here. And would leave home for the new world. The new world. But in other books, it was heavily populated. Right here, like I said, man, I read up on what they did to the Tuscarora Indians, and they was capturing them and enslaving them. Okay, I just read to you right here where it says there was Indian slavery. Indian slavery was ubiquitous. Indian slaves could be found in all 13 mainland British colonies in 1772, as well as in the French and Spanish colonies in North America. So that means where? French, Louisiana, Indian slaves. Spanish was where? Florida. All right, let's go back. So, see, there's an intrepid soul. I seen that intrepid word they used to describe themselves with. Actually, it's either them or us that these words mean, or it'll be a symbolic word like New World. New World means that they came and conquered. See, that's what those two words mean. That um, anyway, this is what this says right here. It says no single factor explains why the 19th century, the 1800s, became such a great era of European migration. And it says the 19th century. It don't say the 18th or the 17th, which is what would have been 16, 19, where they said the first African slaves so-called came here. That means they would have had to have been here for them to. Anyway, okay. Says no single factor explains why the 19th century became such a great era of European migration, but absolutely essential to the movement was the existence of masses of Europeans who were unneeded in their homelands. Okay, that's what this book says. It said it was essential to the movement was the existence of masses of Europeans who were unneeded in their homelands. Okay, now, water. Okay. All right, all right. So it says Europe's growing populations entailed problems and possibilities. Farmers did not have enough land to divide among their children, and as technology improved agriculture, they needed fewer workers to produce their crops. That's a trip. So it's saying Europe's growing population entailed problems and possibilities. Farmers didn't have enough land to divide amongst their children. So, and didn't have enough work for them, right? So, moving on. This one goes into talking about this one goes into talking about the Irish, what made them come, right? What made the Irish people come over here? Says the failure of the Irish potato crop in 1845 and the years immediately following set off a dramatic exodus of people fleeing starvation and the diseases that prey on the hungry. And that's what it said the Irish did. It said the Germans consist. Now this, you see all this stuff's in highlighted, right? So it says Germans constituted the most numerous European ethnic group to come to the United States during the 19th century, right, the 1800s. They were often identified in immigration records, however, as Bavarians, Prus- Prussians, or subjects of some other kingdom or principality because the unification of the hundreds of states that joined to form modern Germany was not completed until 1870. Okay, see that? That's although some Germans were victims of the same potato blight that struck Ireland, the others were political activists who fled after the collapse of the Republican revolutions of 1848. Okay, so down here it says German migration to the United States reached a peak during the 1850s, surpassing the fading influx from Ireland. More than 1 million Germans landed in the United States between 1845 and 1854. Okay. Now, what was going on in 1851? Well, in 1830, they signed the Indian Removal Act. 1838, you had the Trail of Tears where a bunch of folks had to leave their land, you know, the ones that wasn't behind those palisade walls. They had to leave their land to make room for these people. See, to make room for all these people that was coming. See, they had a civil war over there. And Europe then embedded during the, oh, no, no, no. So, yeah, anyway. Um, okay. So we seeing how the numbers on those papers all jump. Look right now. Okay, we look right now. Now, in North Carolina, the white folks, okay, right here they went up about 50,000 in this decade. But remember, it said they didn't. The numbers. I mean, you can't believe these numbers are like that, okay? Because they said the immigration wasn't. Uh, they had barely started warring with the Tuscaroras and those other tribes in 1711 and 13, right? And if you can follow the wars with certain tribes in between that time and the revolution where the 13 colonies became America in 1775. Yeah. Hold on, let me look on. Let me show you something else right here. Okay, what happened? Okay, see. So this here is some George about. Let's see, George Washington. It says the post that had been the object of most concern and discussion dominated the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River. The Great Lakes is over west, right, north and west of, say, Massachusetts or Virginia. Okay, located on American territory south of the boundary established by the Peace Territory of 1783. So this was after that, right? This was after 1783. And they signed this with probably French in there. It was territory south, so Canada was up there, French territory. Okay, the posts were in the hands of the British troops when the war ended, but by the terms of the treaty, they were to be turned over to the United States as speedily as possible. Congress agreed that a force should be retained to occupy the posts as soon as the British left. Now, why would that be? Okay, Congress wanted there to be a force put in place of the British troops before the British troops left. Okay, right, right after. That's because it was still full of what we know today as indigenous people, right? The problem was how and by whom the troops were to be raised. Okay, they didn't know where they was gonna get their troops from to do this, right? Over there in which was New York. New York was also west, I believe, northwest. Anyway, a decision was all the more urgent because the government was in the midst of negotiating a treaty with the Indians of the Northwest, right? Which is, like I said, New York, probably Pennsylvania as well. But it says, as Washington had suggested, a sizable force to awe the Indians would facilitate the negotiations. Now, do you understand what that means? It says, as Washington had suggested, a sizable force to all the Indians would facilitate the negotiations. So they beat the British. The war ended in 1783, I believe. So they became the United States right around there. But they still see how Congress wanted to put other troops in those forts, the posts. They call them the posts right here, but they changed what they call stuff. Right here is the post. That's how uh sort of irrelevant the whole thing was. Now they call it forts. They moved on from that to forts. Right. Uh, so it says, yeah, as Washington had suggested, a sizable force to all the Indians was facilitation. So they was just going to try to get a bunch of them together and then go and talk to them while the Indians could see all of them together. So try to intimidate them, right? Try to intimidate them. That's what they said. But basically, that's showing you right there where they was and where they wasn't and what time. But the deadlock between the New England states and New York continued until early June 1784. Okay, so see, they was recruiting and all that. So I just wanted to point that out that look at these dates. They hadn't even got, they were still negotiating with the Northwest Indians, which was up there in New York and Pennsylvania. Okay, the New York. Plus, they also didn't want to pay their own people. So I was reading that too, but that's something else. So in 1790, it's North Carolina. We just seen on there now. North Carolina, okay. So they went up 50,000 in 10 years, another 40,000 in 10 years, and another basically 40,000 in 10 years, another 50,000, 1850, another 10 years they went 70,000, and they went up another like 70,000 or something, like 70 something thousand. In 1870, they only went up, what, 50,000? Okay, so from 1870 and 1880, after the Civil War, right, they went up to about 200,000. So before that, the highest one was what, um, 70 or something. I don't know. They only had 12,000. They only went up 12,000 right there. Very insignificant number right there, right? But up here they went and at 2,000, right? 200,000. Then up here another 200,000. They started getting thick right there, right at 1870. Right at 1870, they started really the influx, which uh, yeah, let's go back over here. The Germans started coming in 1845 and 1850, in between there. So they was making room for them. So 1870. Oh, okay. Look, so German immigration reached its record high during the 1880s when almost 1.5 million people departed there and came over here, basically. The 1880s, see? So more than 700,000 Swedes arrived between 1869 and 1893. So remember, okay, 1870 was the next year, right? So 1893, what you have? Remember those? Yeah, so Weezers arrived between 1879 and 1893, which was a quarter million of them. Almost 160,000 Danes immigrated between 1869 and 1893. So you see, I mean, it tells you Irish and German was after the Civil War. Irish and German people remained the two largest groups in the European immigration influx. Okay, immigration influx. Why wasn't they all of us? They do give these reasons why these people had to leave their countries. The number one thing at the beginning of this chapter was it said that they were unwanted in the masses, right? But absolutely essential to the movement was the existence of masses of Europeans who were unneeded in their homelands. That's why, uh, yeah, so down here, okay, this the Italians, right? Italians, they, like Germany, Italy was a nation that achieved unification by 1870. Wow. See, that's deep. They, if they achieved, both of these places uh, achieved unification, and a bunch of them had to leave. The unwanted ones. What? I don't get that, but anyway. So this was going on in their own land. It says they poverty was severe between the southern city, right, where they was at, but it says despite they were still poor despite the severe exploitation of the illiterate peasantry. So they taking advantage of folks and still being poor. It says Italy was ready for a wave of immigration at the end of the 19th century. Okay, the end of the 1800s, they was ready for immigration, and a series of crises, including high taxation, the ravages of the olive fly, and the spread of disease in the vineyard, increased the numbers of people departing. The southern provinces accounted for approximately 80% of the exodus. Okay, so up here it says poverty was most severe between the southern city. And it says the southern provinces accounted for approximately 80% of the exodus. If you put that together, okay. By the beginning of the 20th century, the 1900s, however, two-thirds of the immigrants headed for the United States. Okay, so, yeah. So look, you know, they came over here at the beginning of the 1900s. Look what was going on. Look what was happening to so-called black people during them times, right? 1920, Tulsa, Oklahoma, things of that nature, you know. Start looking at this, you start seeing. Anyway, it says the Jewish exodus. In the mid 1880s, Jews appeared among the many newcomers from Germany. 1880s. Okay. Says during the last two decades of the 19th century, 1800s, like 1880 and 90, and through the 90s, and the first two decades of the 20th century, so 19 to 1920, their principal points of departure lay to the east. Principal points of departure. During those years, Central and Eastern Europe lost more than one-third of its Jewish population, and 90% of the immigrants came to the United States. About three out of every four Jewish immigrants came from Russia or from other territories controlled by the Khazar, including the area that would become Poland after World War I. Almost 20% came from lands of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Most of the remainder came from Romania. European Jews valued early marriages in large families. Moreover, the sanitary and dietary practices, listen to this. Moreover, the sanitary and dietary practices prescribed by their religion help protect them against some diseases. Yeah. What don't they eat? I don't know. it could be found out. But that's in the book. The Khazars limited where Jews could live. See how they was being controlled in their own land, right? It says the Khazars limited where Jews could live. Okay, now what if you go look in the, you know, okay, I got the dog barking. Just a second. All right, all right, all right. So, uh, uh, so yeah, so the Khazars limited where Jews could live. Now, I pointed that out specifically because that's what's been going on here. Okay, that's one of the things right there where we've been limited to where we can live to a circumstanced area of Western territory known as the Pale of Settlement. Ooh, right. So there that is there, the type of thing was that map. So yeah, let's see, 1881 to 1920. So 1881 to 1920. Okay, so when you see right here, 1880, they went up almost 200,000 people into that year, and then went up over 200,000 people right there, and then uh, quarter million people right there, and then almost 300,000 right there. See, so uh, starting with starting at 800,000 and ending with 1,783,000. So that's almost a whole million people in those 40 years. Yeah, it's a whole million people in just 40 years. Right, let's see, yeah, 40 years. Okay, so maybe we could go look at some other ones too now. Right, we definitely could do that because right here, population. See, division. See, historical census statistics on population totals by race. 1790s and 1990. See, so okay, so let's just stop on one. So, oh wow, it's New York. New York, United States. New York in 1790. Okay, break that down. Cause we already looked at that other thing, right? We looked at this thing, right? Where this Indian slavery, Indian slaves could be found in all 13 mainland colonies in 1772. Okay, we seen that, right? It says, despite present day conceptions that all slaves were Africans, right? That's the present day conception, right? That's what everybody's trying to roll with. That's what they want us rolling with, right? They want the masses to roll with that, right? All right, so another thing we seen was, oh, let's see, let's see, so they were still over in North Carolina, about to get ready to have a war with these Indians in 1711 through 13. Okay, so I'm just pointing out some stuff to show you that there wasn't no boats coming over here with a bunch of people in it being enslaved. They was encroaching and bringing their colonels and bringing their militias first, and then we seen when they brought their when they brought their regular folks, right? 1880s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 1900, 1910, 1920, right? We seen that. So back over here. Okay, so remember, so they're saying that in New York. Oh, that's what I was looking for. The actual thing. Oh, what was that? Let's go over there. There it is. Okay, right here it said that Washington was in negotiations with a treaty with the Indians of the Northwest. Now, the Northwest was New York, right? 1783. They was so continued in the negotiation. Now, this negotiation with the Indians of the Northwest was different than this deadlock between the New England states and New York. That was who was going to put the troops where these people was at. It was right here, right? Uh, let's see. So yeah, so this is New York, right? No, yeah, it's New York Island, and then this big old thing right here. That's New York. See Albany. Okay, so when they said now this is uh, where they was at, right? This is the Northwest. It's that Northwest. See how they wasn't even they hadn't even by the 1796 they hadn't even went there. You gotta understand the George, the King, when the colonies was still owned by British, he put a ban on settlers encroaching on the west of the Appalachian Mountains. So they didn't really start doing nothing until after they took the land from the British, right? They didn't start really. They said he was in negotiations in the late 1700s. Look, that's when they very first became a country, United States. So it says a sizable force. See, they was trying to get. They didn't know where they was gonna get their troops from. So they was a deadlock until right here, but to all the Indians, a sizable force to all the Indians would facilitate the negotiations. Now I said in the midst of negotiating a treaty with the Indians of the Northwest. Then down here it says a sizable force to all the Indians would facilitate the negotiations. So therefore, that was a intimidation tactic to get these people uh, in the Northwest, which uh, 1790. So that was right after those negotiations. They had some battles. See, 1791 was is after the negotiations in like 1787 or something like that. What was it? Oh, 1783, right? It says engagement with Indians. Look, engagement with Indians. So right there, they was trying to push, trying to get over into Ohio or whatever like that. Okay. Or was it? Yeah, that was Ohio. So there they just kept pushing. So 1812, you had the War of 1812. That lasted 3 years, and they was trying to get over down here. Then they fought like 15 or so different tribes of Indians during the War of 1812. Then after that, that ended in 1815. In 1816, they went down and fought the Creeks. I believe the Seminoles down in Florida, Georgia. Okay, they was trying to kick them off their land. Cherokees, I think, was in there too. Um, and that went on for a long time. Choctaws went over and got in that. Chickasaws was in that. All of that. They was all in that. They started coming down after that. 1815. It was on. It was on. People in Louisiana, they was all. I'm telling you. Look at it. I went. You had the Palisade walls, and you had those that weren't behind them. Remember, it said Harriet Tubman was so free and so-called slaves, which they wasn't slaves. They was Indians, right? There's no way. They was all Indians. All these black so-called black people was actually the Aboriginal people. The Aborigines, right? You can do a timeline on that. Definitely do a timeline. Go back over here though. So, so they saying in New York, okay. Now, so they 500,000 in these 10 years, and then like 700 or 600 some thousand right there. Then 1880 to 1890, almost a whole million people, almost up here from 1890 over a million and some change, right? And what, another almost 2 million, almost 2 million, and then over a million people. You see what I'm saying? Is it New York? That just don't, those numbers they don't look right to me, but okay. Look over here. No Indians until 1860, yeah, 140, right? Look, 1890, 726. But then there's another 1890 that has 6,000. 6,000 showed up, okay? Or 5,000 or something popped up. Now remember that uh, destroyed their own records, signed up to be documented Native Americans to get the land and the native rights and casinos and all that good stuff, right? Here it is. It's all in the documents, okay? Right here. Oh yeah, I think we're gonna end that right there and let you get it on. Peace, peace.